The Yugoslav wars were a series of separate but related ethnic conflicts, wars of independence, and insurgencies that took place in the SFR Yugoslavia from 1991 to 2001. The conflicts both led up to and resulted from the breakup of Yugoslavia, which began in mid-1991 into 6 independent countries matching the 6 entities known as republics that had previously constituted Yugoslavia: Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Serbia and Macedonia, now called North Macedonia. SFR Yugoslavia's constituent republics declared independence due to unresolved tensions between ethnic minorities in the new countries, which fueled the wars. While most of the conflicts ended through peace accords that involved full international recognition of new states, they resulted in a massive number of deaths as well as severe economic damage to the region. A NATO-facilitated ceasefire between the KLA and Yugoslav forces was signed on the 15th of October 1998, but both sides broke it 2 months later and fighting resumed. When the killing of 45 Kosovar Albanians in the Račak massacre was reported in January 1999, NATO decided that the conflict could only be settled by introducing a military peacekeeping force to forcibly restrain the two sides. Yugoslavia refused to sign the Rambouillet Accords, which among other things called for 30,000 NATO peacekeeping troops in Kosovo, an unhindered right of passage for NATO troops on Yugoslav territory, immunity for NATO and its agents to Yugoslav law, and the right to use local roads, ports, railways and airports without payment, and requisition public facilities for its use free of cost. NATO then prepared to install the peacekeepers by force, using this refusal to justify the bombings. In the 23rd of March 1999 at 22:17 UTC, the Secretary-General of NATO, Javier Solana, announced he had directed the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, SACEUR, General Wesley Clark, to initiate air operations in the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. The campaign involved 1,000 aircraft operating from air bases in Italy and Germany, and the aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt sailing in the Adriatic Sea. During the 10 weeks of the conflict, NATO aircraft flew over 38,000 combat missions. A large element of the operation was the air forces of NATO, relying heavily on the US Air Force and Navy by involving the stealth bombers F-117 Nighthawk. The F-117 Nighthawk was born after the Vietnam War, where increasingly sophisticated Soviet surface-to-air missiles, SAMs, had downed heavy bombers. The heavy losses inflicted by Soviet-made SAMs upon the Israeli Air Force in the 1973 Yom Kippur War also contributed to a 1974 Defence Science Board assessment that in case of a conflict in Central Europe, air defences would likely prevent NATO airstrikes on targets in Eastern Europe. It was a black project, an ultra-secret program for much of its life. Very few people in the Pentagon knew the program even existed. The project began in 1975 with a model called the Hopeless Diamond, a wordplay on the Hope Diamond because of its appearance. The following year, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, issued Lockheed Skunk Works a contract to build and test 2 stealth strike fighters under the code name Have Blue. These subscale aircraft incorporated jet engines of the Northrop T-38A, fly-by-wire systems of the F-16, landing gear of the A-10, and environmental systems of the C-130. By bringing together existing technology and components, Lockheed built 2 demonstrators under budget at $35 million for both aircraft and in record time. Under Secretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, William J. Perry was instrumental in shepherding the project. The NATO bombing of Yugoslavia followed an intervention against Serbian forces with a mainly bombing campaign under the command of General Wesley Clark. Hostilities ended 2.5 months later with the Kumanovo Agreement. Kosovo was placed under the governmental control of the United Nations Interim Administration Mission in Kosovo and the military protection of the Kosovo Force, KFOR. The 15-month war had left thousands of civilians killed on both sides and over 1 million displaced. A dozen Nighthawks had deployed to Aviano, Italy on February 21st to participate in Operation Allied Force, a NATO bombing campaign intended to pressure Belgrade into withdrawing its troops from the province of Kosovo after President Slobodan Milosevic initiated a brutal ethnic cleansing campaign seeking to expel the Kosovar Albanian population. On the 27th of March 1999, the 3rd Battalion of the 250th Air Defence Missile Brigade of the Army of Yugoslavia, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel, later Colonel Zoltan Dani, was standby for any air attack. At about 8:15 p.m. local time, several missiles with a range of about 8 miles, 13 kilometres, were launched. They detected the F-117 Nighthawk at a range of about 23 kilometres, operating their equipment for no more than 17 seconds to avoid being locked onto by NATO anti-air suppression. The F-117, call sign Vega 31, was being flown by Lieutenant Colonel Daryl Patrick Dale Zelko. He observed the two missiles punch through the low cloud cover and head straight for his aircraft. The first passed over him, close enough to cause buffeting, but did not detonate. The second missile detonated nearby, its shrapnel and shockwave causing significant damage to the aircraft and causing it to tumble out of control. The missile that hit the Zelko was S-125 Neva Pechora surface-to-air missile. Zelko was subject to intense G-forces as the aircraft tumbled and had great difficulty in assuming the correct posture for ejecting. After his parachute deployed, he used his survival radio to issue a Mayday call and was able to contact the KC-135 that had seen him shot down. Zelko used his survival radio while still descending. Although this was contrary to his training, he reasoned the altitude would give his signal the best possible range, and was also sure he would be quickly taken prisoner by Yugoslav forces on the ground, and wanted to confirm he was unhurt before this happened. It was the first ever shoot-down of a stealth technology airplane. The pilot ejected safely and was rescued by US Air Force pararescuemen conducting search and rescue.